Excellency Denis Sassou Nguesso, President of the Republic of Congo, Your Excellency Emerson Mnangagwa, President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Your Excellency Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda, Your Excellency Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, President of the Republic of Somalia, Your Excellency Mohammed Yunus Memfi, President of the Presidential Council of Libya, Your Excellency Mohammed Musa Faki Mahamat, Chair of the Africa Union Commission, Your Excellency Evangelist Akiwumi Adesina, President of the Africa Development Bank, Your Excellency former President Joaquim Chissano of Mozambique, Your Excellencies, Vice Presidents, Prime Ministers, representatives of heads of state, Your Excellency Governor of Nairobi, Johnson Sakaja, Madam Martha Koome, Chief Justice and President of the Supreme Court of the Republic of Kenya, Excellencies, Ministers, Honorable Governors, ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted and privileged to preside over the opening session of the 59th Annual Summit of the Africa Development Bank Group. On behalf of the people and government of Kenya, I extend a very warm welcome to each of you and invite you to feel at home in this land of many delights. It is a great honor for Kenya to host the 59th meeting of the Africa Development Bank Group, especially as the group celebrates its 60th anniversary. Let me put this in context. We had also the privilege to host the 30th anniversary of the Africa Development Group in 1994. We are privileged to host the 60th. And I have requested the Africa Development Bank Group to offer Kenya the 90th anniversary in 2054. And I promise that even if I would be walking with a walking stick, I will attend. This milestone should frame our deliberations and engagements during these meetings. We are gathered here to reflect on the progress of our continent that has made in realizing the founding vision of this institution, the Africa Development Bank. Formed in the first decade following the independence of most African countries, the Africa Development Bank embodies the Pan-African ideology of sovereignty, prosperity, and unity. As a matter of fact, one of the founding communiques of this institution clearly declares the determination of African nations to use all our resources to lead all African countries to independence and achieve the development and prosperity of the continent in unity. That was done 60 years ago. And over 6 decades, the group, like the continent, has not only survived many crises and challenges, but has also grown stronger and achieved much in supporting economic growth and stability in our continent. It has become Africa's premier development financing institution. To date, it has financed 5,432 projects across our land, 4,036 of them which have been completed, provided a mechanism to coordinate the fight against poverty, improve the standards of African financial institutions and other institutions, and contributed significantly to conflict prevention and resolution. You agree with me, ladies and gentlemen, that Africa Development's performance has been nothing short of sterling. I think they deserve a better round of applause. Nevertheless, the pace of African economic growth and development has not kept pace with the rest of the world. More concerning is that the pace of African development remains far behind its undeniable potential. Intra-African trade remains low, with its share of global GDP less than 3%. Africa's share of global trade is also low, at just about 2%, and our exports are primarily unprocessed produce and raw materials. Not surprisingly, the rates of poverty and unemployment are still high on our continent. The vulnerabilities arising from this situation undoubtedly contribute significantly to conflict, economic refugees, and in this age of frequent extreme climate shocks, climate refugees. There is tremendous urgency in developing and implementing transformative interventions to turn things around for our continent, our countries, and our people. I am confident that this sense of urgency resonates very strongly amongst African leaders, and I am encouraged that we are not just doing something about it. We are actually making very good progress. Our continent is growing at the world's fastest rate, exceeding the global average of 3%, and 11 of the world's fastest growing economies in 2023 were African countries. We were told that by Adesina. Between 2000 and 2002, Africa's real GDP increased at an annual rate of 4.3%, well above the global average of 2.9%. 7 of the 10 world's fastest growing economies were in this continent of Africa. The Pan-African Economic Integration Agenda has finally taken off. Our regional economic blocs are vibrant and effective, while the African Continental Free Trade Area has come into effect and already made a huge impact. Although much remains to be accomplished before intra-Africa trade is smooth across borders, the data indicates strong positive movement following the launch of the Guided Trading Initiative. As we look into the future, with this optimism, we are also cognizant of the immediate challenges we must confront and overcome. Africa faces multiple serious challenges, including geopolitical risks, the broader effects of armed conflict, the COVID-19 pandemic and its effect, disruptions in the global supply chains, and persistent extreme weather due to climate change and macroeconomic instability. To compound this crisis, the economies of the continent continue to bear the burden of rising costs of servicing huge national debts, caused in part by high global interest rates and, of course, external shocks. I am, however, confident that the strong positive response by African leaders and nations to the Africa Union Agenda 2063 signals our collective intent to undertake radical transformation of African economies, achieve sustainable development goals, and unite our people in prosperity. We have what it takes to succeed, and current activities show movement in an encouraging direction. To achieve this transformation, a consistent commitment of substantial resources is required to invest in infrastructure, industrial capacity to deliver rapid growth. However, we face the rigid barrier of global financial architecture that is fundamentally misaligned with our aspirations. We routinely borrow from international markets at rates far above those paid by the rest of the world, often up to 8 or 10 times more. These rates are said to factor in something arbitrary called risk profile that is notably not applied when considering mineral extraction, even in areas of active conflict. It is safe, we are told, to mine in spaces where there is conflict, but it is risky to lend to African economies. What a contradiction. The debt problem faced by many countries, which consume the largest share of national resources and starve development agenda, we are a direct result of this unjust financial architecture. This situation not only makes debt unsustainable, but also undermines growth, prevents countries from investing in resilience, and denies millions of people, especially young men and women, their fair shot at life's opportunities. Africa remains most vulnerable to the effects of climate change, as evidenced by recent devastating floods, for example, in Kenya, and drought in Southern Africa, from which we are still working to recover, as well as other climate-related disasters across the continent. The adverse impact of climate change or the fiscal sustainability of many economies, especially in developing countries in Africa, deserves our serious attention. Despite contributing only 4% of global carbon emissions, we bear the brunt of climate change effects. Climate change is a threat multiplier. Its direct impact and related responses negatively affect our fiscal position through reduced revenues and increased public spending. The frequency of extreme weather events continuously diminish the resources available for public investment and provision of critical public goods, such as health, education, and other social services. In particular, climate change has often resulted in substantial reallocation of resources towards mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. This is why Africa advocates for a financial architecture that integrates the issues on climate change and public finance at the center. I am proud of African heads of state who have not hesitated to make their voices heard in various fora, including through the Africa Leaders Nairobi Declaration on Climate Change and Call to Action that we held here in Nairobi. Climate change and sovereign debt are now firmly integrated, trapping governments in a vicious cycle where increasing losses and damage from climate impacts leads to rising costs of mobilizing resources for public investment. With such high financing costs and constrained government budgets, developing countries continue to struggle investing in low carbon and climate resilient development. At risk, therefore, are both climate action and our sustainable development goals. A better, more responsive, and fairer international financial architecture is urgently needed, and time here is of the essence. The financial architecture we advocate for as Africa today should integrate the continent's most challenging development issues of debt sustainability and climate vulnerability to enable development goals, SDGs, and Agenda 2063 commitments to be achieved. I am encouraged by Africa Development Bank's vision for the continent, underpinned by the high fives strategies and the objectives of the newly adopted 2024-2033 10-year strategy, which provide important foundations for these critical continental objectives. Let me agree with my brother, President Adesina, on the array of investments that he has spoken to this morning. Kenya is among the beneficiaries in a very big way of Africa Development Bank's financial might and their innovative financing of projects. Let me give you just 3 examples. Africa Development Bank became the first institution for us to build the first superhighway from Nairobi through Thika, and today they are dueling the same road all the way to Maroa, about 150 kilometers. Africa Development Bank worked with us to provide water and sanitation in 28 towns and cities in Kenya that today all of them are complete. And Africa Development Bank is building with us the largest water dam in Kenya in a place called Tuake. And of course, Africa Development Bank did what Adesina said. Last 10 years, working with Africa Development Bank, other multilateral banks, and friends, they have enabled Kenya to increase electricity connectivity from 27% in the last 10 years to 76% today. We have been clear and consistent in our advocacy. Africa is neither seeking handouts nor asking for charity. We are a continent of sovereign people who aspire to grow in a just multilateral system and access development financing on fair terms. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not too much to ask. We were clear at the Africa Climate Summit last year when we called for reforms of the international financial institutions and a range of new global taxes to fund climate action. We were clear at COP28 in Dubai last December when we once again emphasized the urgent need to mobilize investment for climate transition in developing countries from public and private sources globally. We also agreed to support the creation of markets that can mobilize resources at scale and called for the reform of the international financial architecture. Today, we assert that transforming the international financial architecture is an imperative that will give Africa a fair chance to turn its immense potential into opportunities to overcome multiple challenges and develop inclusively and sustainably. I take this opportunity to reiterate my call at the recent concluded IDA 21 summit here in Nairobi, that we appeal for a substantial 17th replenishment of the Africa Development Fund by at least US $25 billion to increase its capacity to continue providing concessional financing to the least developed African countries. We therefore call on our donors and development partners to scale up their investment in our continent's premier development financial institution, the Africa Development Bank. To further strengthen the capacity of our multilateral development institutions, we strongly support the proposal to rechannel special drawing rights through the Africa Development Bank as endorsed by the Africa Union's Assembly of Heads of State and Government. And because we must believe in ourselves for others to believe in us, and we must invest in these institutions for others to invest in them, Kenya has made the decision that over the next 3 years, we are going to invest $100 million in enhancing our shareholding in Africa Development Bank, AfriExim Bank, and Trade Development Bank. We have already made the investment in AfriExim Bank. I will be discussing